The Overlord Reset Hypothesis, a Hidden Cycle of Civilization. Intro. The Hidden Pattern. Imagine this. Every time humanity reaches the pinnacle of its abilities, something happens. Not a random downturn, not the slow erosion of time, a decisive step backward as if an unseen hand has tapped the brakes. We rebuild, we relearn, and eventually we race forward again until the next hand appears on the wheel. Today we call that rhythm the rise and fall of civilizations. But what if that story is incomplete? What if the falls aren't purely accidents of nature or failures of governance, but the fallout from deliberate choices by an overlord class, human or otherwise, that manages the ceiling of our progress? What if progress is not a straight road, but a controlled corridor with hidden doors, false exits, and one-way mirrors? That idea sounds theatrical until you start to line up the patterns. Systems grow complex, external shocks arrive, key knowledge vanishes, and survivors inherit a world that suddenly seems simpler than it was before. The records of the preceding age survive mostly in myths, stone, and hints, while the delicate instruments, documents, and memory palaces of the day are nowhere to be found. The cycle turns, and the public story resets. Framing the hypothesis. The Overlord Reset. Hypothesis is not a claim that a single cabal meets in a room to plan history. It's a model for reading the archaeological and historical record, a way to interpret abrupt simplifications, missing precursors, highly durable monuments paired with fragile archives, and cultural amnesia that follows periods of extraordinary ability. Sometimes nature forces a reset, sometimes elites shepherd it, sometimes the outcome is a collaboration between crisis and control. But the effect is similar. Advanced capability quietly recedes, while the official narrative insists we were never more capable than we are right now. To examine that possibility responsibly, we'll move across 8 phases, each grounded in what is known, layered with anomalies that invite questions, and connected by a through line. The stone tablet principle, the idea that the most durable mediums carry the long memory of a civilization, while its high-velocity knowledge lives and dies on fragile substrates. Phase 1, the age of high advancement. Picture a world older than our textbooks prefer to talk about, a world where engineering, surveying, and energy use may have been both widespread and intentionally modest in appearance. We are not talking smartphones and satellites. We are talking mastery of forces and materials expressed through permanence and precision, granite that behaves under the tool as if it were soft wood, blocks set so tightly that air will not slip between them 1,000 years later, alignments that bind structures to the sky with an accuracy you can measure with lasers. Legends from the world's oldest literatures hint at such an age: the Greek Golden Age, the Hindu Satya Yuga, the Sumerian antediluvian kings whose reigns last suspiciously long. These aren't proofs, but they are persistent memories. Around the world, megalithic architecture hints at global understanding. The consistent use of cardinal alignments, the privileging of specific angles and ratios, the careful placement along geodesics that shorten Earth surface distances as if the builders were, somehow, thinking in great circles long before great circle routes had a name. And then there are the marks that look like tool signatures, drill spirals in hard stone, saw kerfs where hand tools should have struggled, polish that suggests abrasive regimes beyond sand and water. The conservative reading says ingenuity plus patience. The provocative reading says capability plus restraint. If there was an overlord class here, their power would have been less about pageantry and more about custody of knowledge, the ability to decide which techniques were common craft and which remained in the vault. Phase 2, the first reset, Younger Dryas, approximately 12,900 to 11,700 years ago. Now the shock, rapid cooling, then chaotic warming, sea levels racing upward, ecosystems lurching. The Younger Dryas is a fact of paleoclimate. The trigger is still debated. The key for our hypothesis is not whether a comet struck or a solar event unfolded, but what happens when a civilization that optimizes for stability faces chaotic conditions. Complex systems fail at their weak seams. High maintenance infrastructure turns fragile. Supply lines that look like veins turn into liabilities. The simplest tools outlive the most sophisticated ones. Across cultures, flood narratives remember something more than a storm. They remember knowledge triage. Boats and mountains and survivors don't merely symbolize salvation, they symbolize curation. What do you take when you cannot take it all? If our forebears held a layered archive, a living world of techniques and a durable world of symbols, what gets carried forward are the symbols in stone and story. The living systems go dark. Enter Göbekli Tepe, intentionally buried as if laid down to sleep through an age of turbulence. If it's a time capsule, it teaches a grim lesson. The best way to preserve advanced ideas through a reset is not to keep them running, but to cast them into forms that do not need power, maintenance, or permission to endure. Phase 3, the age of fragmented memory, 10,000 to 3,000 BCE. After the storm, gardeners, small settlements knit fields to stars and seasons. Memory lives in rituals, in counting systems, in the shape of a temple's court and the path of a pilgrim's feet. What is conspicuously absent are the manuals of the old machine, yet the world keeps tossing up shards of a forgotten geometry, maps whose sources seem older than their compilers, a coastal outline here, an ice-free detail there, monuments whose workmanship outruns their toolkits on paper. Consider the social physics of a post-reset world. Apprentices learn by doing, not by reading. Craft is family property. Long-distance roots persist as songs and wayfinding stories. Wherever a node of the old system survives, a port, a quarry, a school of builders, it acts as a lighthouse in the fog. The public sees the light. The instructions to build a lighthouse are gone. That's how you get stonework that looks like machining without leaving a machinist's shop behind. That's how you get exquisite joinery in places where metallurgy should be the bottleneck. But evidently, it is not. Fragmentation isn't failure, it's containment. If an overlord program were operating, it would prefer 1,000 bright villages to one city that learns how to network them beyond oversight. Phase 4, the semi-open age, 3000 BCE to 500 CE. Suddenly the villages become capitals, writing flowers, states collect grain, organize labor, and project power in stone, bronze, and iron. The great river kingdoms display administrative genius, tallies and seals and weights, law codes and taxation, calendars and monuments that calibrate the heavens. To the standard narrative, this looks like the slow maturation of complexity. To the reset hypothesis, it looks like conditional access. Enough knowledge flows into the open to build pyramids and cities. The crucial leaps, unbounded energy, materials science at will, computation in miniature, remain gated. Look at the anomalies. The Great Pyramid's alignment and interior tolerances challenge our sense of incremental apprenticeship. The Antikythera mechanism appears fully formed and disappears for a millennium, as if someone opened a drawer, showed a glimpse, and closed it again. Indus Valley cities show public health priorities and standardization that feel modern, then vanish without leaving an obvious imperial mythology. Periodic collapses punctuate the era. Akkadian drought and dust, late Bronze Age upheaval, Maya political reformatting. The cycle breathes in and out. The ceiling holds. Phase 5. The medieval control layer, 500 to 1500 CE. After Rome's Western institutions fragment, the locus of knowledge narrows. Libraries burn or drift into private custody. Scribes become the encryption layer. Replication slows. Marginalia become the comments section of an age without mass literacy. Cathedrals rise. Mathematics in limestone, acoustics in vaulting, calendars in light and shadow. The idea of progress survives in sacred time more than secular. Revelation frames curiosity, and curiosity learns to speak in allegory. The cathedral never says do not calculate, it says calculate in code. If you were managing the ceiling of development, this is the perfect mechanism. Permit wonder, channel it into safe forms, and ensure that high-energy experimentation remains the vocation of a tiny priesthood. What leaks out to the towns is art and devotion. What stays behind closed doors is the toolkit that would have birthed an early scientific industrial synthesis. The reset holds for 1,000 years, a long inhale with just enough sparks to keep the ember of inquiry alive. Phase 6. The modern reemergence, 1500 to 1900 CE. Then oxygen, the press, portolan charts, gunpowder and caravels, finance that can mobilize entire societies for voyages and wars. The rebirth isn't merely literary, it's logistical. Copies proliferate, debates travel, secrecy becomes harder, and the ceiling must either rise or break. It rises, fast. Steam tears labor from muscle. Telegraph compresses continents into seconds. Electricity convinces night to imitate day. Medicine and sanitation rewrite the math of cities. In this brief span, humanity rediscovers the habit of compounding innovation. And yet, look closely, entire branches of exploration appear, flash bright, and are quietly folded away. Alternative currents and motors, non-chemical means of propulsion, early electric urbanism, some paths fail on merit, many are outcompeted, and a few seem to vanish into corporate drawers or strategic vaults, not because they lacked promise, but because their promise didn't serve the prevailing order. Whether by market gravity or managerial design, society walks a particular ridgeline to modernity, ignoring the valleys to either side. Phase 7. The digital trap, 1900 to present. Now the paradox. Our knowledge has never been broader. Its storage has never been more fragile. The library became the server farm, the codex became the codec, and the archivist became an algorithm deciding what persists and what is demoted to oblivion. We have traded material redundancy for networked convenience, the heft of paper for the elegance of packets, and in doing so, we created a new failure mode, the mass forgetting that comes not from fire and flood, but from permissions and power outages. Meanwhile, the gatekeepers have multiplied and diffused. They are corporations with user agreement sovereignty, states with surveillance appetites, and machine learning models that rank, redact, and rewrite. You do not need a single overlord when the system itself behaves like one, a distributed custodian of what can be known, when, and by whom. The ceiling can now lower not with armies and edicts, but with silent updates and quiet deprecations. A feature disappears, an API closes, an archive link dies. Knowledge doesn't have to be burned if it can be buried under version numbers. Phase 8. The next reset, speculative near future. If the pattern holds, the next simplification won't look like barbarians at the gate. It will look like battery warnings, certificate errors, incompatible formats, and blackouts that cascade across grids designed for efficiency, not resilience. It will look like data sets that no longer open and skills that no longer map to tools we can maintain without global supply chains. It will feel less like an apocalypse and more like a narrowing. Fewer options, fewer dependencies we can safely trust. more local work done with hands and heat and the sun overhead. And then the stone tablet principle returns. Not literally tablets for everything, but an ethic of durability, knowledge expressed in mediums that a village can keep alive, paper with real inks, instruments that can be calibrated without software, mechanical methods taught by practice, not password. Communities keep seed libraries and tool libraries. Households keep notebooks that outlive chargers. The point is not to reject technology, it is to immunize knowledge against the failure modes of the current stack. From the vantage of a future archaeologist, our time will leave confusing ruins, glass towers whose internal brains evaporated, oceans salted with cables that no longer carry light, servers that look like tombs for languages no one reads. The story they'll be told will depend on what survives outside the machine. A working thesis for today. If the overlord reset hypothesis is even partly right, vigilance has a shape. First, diversify the memory of your world. Keep a print, keep a copy, keep a know-how. Second, cultivate institutions that survive outages, schools that teach craft, clinics that practice low-tech medicine alongside high-tech miracles, farms that grow soil as well as yield. Third, require explainability for the tools you depend on. If you cannot explain their basics to a neighbor with a pencil, your resilience is rented, not owned. None of this precludes reaching for the stars. It simply says, take a rope with you and tie it to home. Make every leap with a way back that does not require a proprietary bridge. Outro, the question that remains. If history is, in part, a curated corridor, the most rebellious act is to become your own archivist, not because you distrust progress, but because you respect it enough to protect it from the fragility of its most fashionable forms. We may not know whether an overlord class has ever existed. We do know that resets do. We have lived through smaller ones. The record bears the scars of larger ones. So ask yourself, what would your great-grandchildren need to keep building if the lights flickered for a decade? What would you send through the tunnel of time if you knew that myths and stone last longer than servers and silicon? What in your life is worth carving into a tablet? Maybe that is the quiet continuity between the oldest stones and the newest screens, a single species trying to outwit oblivion. If there were overlords, perhaps they were only the first to learn how hard a problem that really is. If there were not, the lesson remains the same. Build high, store low, teach wide, and leave behind more than a password,